I'll stop being so painful soon, I promise. So welcome all. Really, really good to see so many people on the call this morning and engaged in this conversation. I'm here just to really facilitate our conversation together. So I've got as you sort of noticed, got a couple of slides that I'll talk through in terms of the topic of this morning, which is all about sponsorship versus coaching and the sort of complementary elements of that, but also the distinctions. But I'm afraid that I will try and loop in you all as much as possible so that we can share experiences together and learn from one another. So hopefully quite a conversational topic today, and we'll see how we get on. So in that vein, what I was hoping for, and I haven't tested this with Natasha, so it might go completely wrong, but I was hoping just to engage everybody at the beginning, just understanding where we are as a group. So I'm hoping by using the raising the hands function, if I ask everybody whether or not you have an active sponsee relationship at the moment, if you do, if you could just raise your hand, so just get a kind of feeling across the group where we are. Wow. Okay, I think the hands have stopped moving. So we've got, looks like about half of the group are sort of actively in a sponsor relationship, which is fantastic. And then I'm guessing then the other half are.
Sorry, Dave, you've just put yourself on mute. I'm not sure how.
So thanks, Natasha. You have to keep telling me if I do anything stupid. So I think I'm not sure if everyone heard that, but so it looks like we've got about half the group sort of actively in a sponsee relationship, and half perhaps looking to find out more and looking for that kind of sponsee connection. So grateful for all of you being here, and what it might be as we go through some of the questions, it'd be great to hear from some of the people who are actively in a relationship about some of their experiences and what they've learned, and also some thoughts from people who are yet to embark on the adventure, and perhaps some of the anxieties and things that people might have that we can talk through together. So I think ready now, Natasha, if we share the slides, and maybe just go straight to slide 2. So as a quick overview of what we're going to kind of go through today, I'm going to try and, as I say, keep my bit fairly short and just talk a little bit about some of the differences between coaching and sponsorship, how we might use them together distinctly, and then try and get into some of these real life examples, which, spoiler alert, I'm afraid come from you as a group rather than some that I'm going to kind of reel off, albeit I'm also really happy to share my experiences as well, and then just try and get into a discussion about how we can kind of take this program together forward and learn from each other. So I hope that's okay. What I'll do is I'll do the slides to start with and then pause for any sort of clarification questions or bits that people would like to dig into a little more before we get into the wider discussion. But if you have any questions along the way that you're thinking of, I'd also use the chat function, pop those questions in, and then we can return to them when we have a slot. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So just opening up on sort of why this is such an important topic, really. And for those of you that have delved into this subject already, you'll be really familiar with this. And for those of you that are just embarking, take a look at the sponsorship toolkit on the One NHS Finance website, and we'll sort of direct you towards that at the end, where you'll find lots of case studies, some research undertaken across various sectors that describe, you know, why we're talking about sponsorship, why it's so important. And there's two, you know, really big aspects to that for me. The first is that there's some clear evidence that shows having a sponsor is a critical success factor for people in terms of development of their career, and particularly in securing a promotion, you know, in the relatively short term whilst undertaking a sponsorship type program. So really important to support our colleagues in you know, maximising their potential and getting to places within their career that can be enabled through a sponsorship program. And second, and probably more importantly than that, this is evidenced through some of that research, but also something that I found not just in sponsorship, but other kind of career development opportunities. Whilst not designed in this way, there's certainly some anecdotal evidence, and as I say, evidence in the research that backs this up, that some of our colleagues are much more comfortable accessing opportunities that are available through our kind of connections networks, SDN, One NHS Finance, all the rest of it, than others are. And so what that is driving is an unequal playing field or an unequal access of opportunity across our colleagues across the NHS Finance community. And of course, we can see that in inequity in our senior leadership profile. So this One NHS Finance sponsorship programme specifically looks to counterbalance that by increasing the number of folk from underrepresented groups in that leadership community through undertaking this kind of sponsorship program. So it's really kind of looking to tackle some of those inequities that we find in NHS Finance leadership as well, which is really, really important. So moving on then to some of the content. So a little bit about what the difference between coaching and sponsorship is. And if you go into the toolkit or look at some of the events coming up as well, we also talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and the three are often sort of seen together in a bit of a Venn diagram, which is true to an extent, but we need to understand where the distinctions lie. So there's some blurb on the slide that you can all read, but for me, there's a couple of things that make the difference here. So for coaching, this for me is really about tackling with your coach specific kind of problems, and it is about supporting the wider career development, and it could be run over a longer period, or it could be tackling a specific short-term challenge that you have at work or within your kind of career development. But it's very much a sort of self-reflection type mechanism, technique, if you like. So it's all about the coach bringing out in the coachee the ideas, the self-awareness, the types of things that might need to change in order to tackle the problem in front of them, and exploring that problem together in a confidential, safe space. But it's more about, for me, the development of the coachee themselves, using the coach as a sort of facilitator of that to come up with their own solutions to the challenges in front of them. Sponsorship then is quite different. It is proactively, often a more senior person in the sponsor role, talking to a more junior sponsee, and it is about the sponsee leveraging the network, connections, advice from that sponsor. And it is a very public rather than necessarily private relationship. It's something that would have to be outed, if you like, for the intervention to work. And it's for a sponsor to take on quite an interventionist approach in terms of trying to secure your sponsee a promotion in the relatively short run, or some other support at work, not necessarily a promotion. So it might involve personal introductions to people in your network. It might involve putting your reputation on the line for them and publicly advocating for the sponsee. So both aimed at supporting and developing colleagues, but in quite different ways. I think you'll probably agree. So the next slide just then talks a little bit about what a sponsor is. And again, this is taken from the toolkit, and there's lots more information in there on this kind of topic. This is a bit of research undertaken a few years ago now, but you can find the whole detail online. It's really quite detailed and really interesting. There's a group of leaders across a few different companies that have kind of undertaken this research together. And this diagram for me is really helpful summary of what it means to be a sponsor, and something that I've sort of looked at quite a few times ahead of having my kind of conversations to make sure I'm focusing in on the right things. So the green kind of oval shapes there just talk to what I was referring to earlier in terms of that advocacy concept, and that as a sponsor we need to proactively go out and secure support for our sponsees in various ways. And then the blue kind of arc of ovals beneath that are some of the things then that you might be doing as a result of trying to achieve that those green ovals. So really helpful diagram, just that you can kind of look at without reading anything further behind this. But if you go through and read a little bit more on the research itself, the sponsor effect, it's really interesting to look at some of the case studies in there, and particularly a proactive look at the gender inequity when it has come to sponsorship over the years. And again, as I said at the top, something this programme is specifically looking to tackle. So final bit from me, Natasha, if we move on to the next slide, I hope, is just a little bit about where coaching there and sponsorship do overlap in my mind. And one of the discussion points I've got for us is to try and kind of tease out some of those experiences we've all had, because I think this does naturally, from my experiences, does naturally kind of overlap almost in the same conversation at times. So we've talked through some of the differences in coaching and sponsorship, but ultimately they're both there to support colleagues to develop. They're both usually rooted in a positive expectation of on that sponsee that they do have the potential to develop, and that we are able to support them as sponsors. And so sometimes you might find yourself shifting in between that kind of coaching and sponsorship. And I thought there's a bit of blurb on the slide again, but I thought I'd give an example of how I kind of see the difference. So I've one of the sponsors that I worked with was specifically looking at a promotion and something that they'd struggled with over a number of years. They'd done a series of applications at a particular level in the organisation, and were just unable to kind of essentially break into the interview room, was the example. So I think you could use coaching and sponsorship in this scenario and use them together, but they were quite different. So actually there's something on coaching around working with the individual, perhaps on their application process, talking to them about how they prepare for the interview, and sort of using some of those coaching techniques to bring about the kind of best preparation possible from the candidate's perspective, allowing them to gain kind of wider thought process around how they might tackle that application process and interview process itself. The sponsorship piece might come in where you then have, actively advocate for that individual to get them into the room for the interview. So that might be about leveraging the network to introduce them to recruiting managers or other people in the organisation, so that they can get a better feel for the organisation, and in turn help to improve their application and indeed interview if they were successful on shortlisting. But it also might mean about giving them some advice. It might be a role that you've done before, and you can kind of proactively give them some advice, some insight into what you might have experienced. And that isn't necessarily something you'd get from a coaching experience. So these things in my mind can be used together. And I think it'd be really helpful for us to talk a little bit about how you might play those two roles, and whether it's ideal for those two roles to be done by different people and you work together as a sort of triumvirate, or where and when it might be possible for one individual to play those two kind of distinct roles within somebody's career development. So I think we can take the slides down for a moment, Natasha. Thanks. And apology, I've just realised, having skipped to slide 2 of the deck, I didn't say hello and who I was. So for those that don't know me, I'm Dave Cooper, an interim CFO at Lewisham Greenwich NHS Trust, and more importantly for this conversation, a sponsor on the programme. So hopefully some of that made sense. Before we I've got a few questions to ask folk in terms of trying to share some of their experiences on the programme. But before we move into that, has anybody got any questions on some of the content that we just went through? And again, it would be good to hear from different people and different experiences on that. Lee, is that?
Yeah, that's great. Hi, David. Sorry, where does mentoring fit into that sort of coaching, sponsorship, and mentoring? Where does that sit?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I think it's a really good question. As mentioned earlier, and at the back of the slides, we'll direct you to that. But there's another session that you can attend on the differences between mentoring and sponsorship. And for me, that's somebody who provides insight into their experience, some advice on career development, and is more actively over a longer period of time than this sort of sponsorship arrangement, which could be quite a short-lived relationship. There's some overlap, I think, in terms of the advocacy point. As a mentor, you might also advocate for your mentee in those situations, but it's not necessary, I think. Whereas I think the sponsorship role is specifically designed to advocate and proactively sort of intervene externally for the relationship, whereas a mentoring piece might well be between the two of you and not necessarily spill out wider than that. But as you say, there's clearly an overlap. And I suspect Natasha somewhere has got a sort of Venn diagram of the three sort of tools, because I think there is an overlap, and there's probably a role that one person might play doing all three of those things. Equally, it might be done at different stages of people's career with different people, and an individual might have both a mentor and a sponsor at the same time. Does that help?
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, I was just sat there wondering about like you say, they all overlap, don't they? And that kind of, no, super. Thank you very much.
Right, that's it. And Lorraine, and sorry, probably helpful if you introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Bromley-Martin. I'm the engagement manager here at NHS England in the East of England region. Hi. So I was only recently paired with a sponsee, and we met last week, and it went really well, which is great. But she's looking to grow her network. She's studying, so she's not ready to move up yet, but she wants to grow her network, etc. And I've put some ideas in place, and because of some of the stuff that she's doing, I've given her some opportunity to share that at a wider forum. Just wondered if you had any sort of ideas that I could take forward as well, please.
Yeah,
thanks,
Lorraine. So I think one of the things, and somebody asked in the chat actually about, so you might link the two if that's okay, about do you have to know your sponsee ahead of kind of agreeing this relationship? And I think it might talk to your question a little bit as well, Lorraine. So for me, this program matches two people together, and to really advocate for somebody, you have to be quite confident that they're aligned to your values, that you're happy to speak on their behalf, you're happy to recommend them to your wider network. And if you're not happy to do that, then you might be able to help them in another way, but not quite in the way that we're describing to sponsorship. So one of the things I was going to ask you, Lorraine, is, and type of thing that I talk through when I have a new sponsee, is, am I the right fit as a sponsor? And if they're really clear about actually what I'm looking to do is improve my network in Southeast London, that's where I'm kind of based, then yes, I feel confident I can do that. I've got connections in all the organisations that operate here, and I also kind of perhaps have done some of the roles you've done and can connect people who have done similar roles to what you're looking to achieve, sort of thing. If they were based quite far away and they were looking to grow their network in a completely different region, then I might not be the best person to do that. I might be able to support them in terms of their thinking about how they would go about making some connections, but I might be the person who can reach into an organisation and directly connect them with somebody. So I guess, Ray, my question back to you was going to be, do you feel confident with the network that you have and it matches up to where the sponsor is looking?
Yes, luckily she's in my system. And I'm actually not a finance professional. I work in the finance team, but I'm not a finance professional. So that was an unusual sort of, I wasn't sure if I would ever get paired actually, but because this individual is looking for network experience rather than to get to the next level in finance, it suits really, really well. And I run national programs and stuff for underrepresented groups with the HFMA and different various forums. So so I've got an in there. But yeah, I just thought, well, I've got an audience, I might as well ask, mightn't I? But yeah, thanks for responding, and thanks for the chat.
I guess more specifically there, my gut would be thinking about where you can proactively insert that person into some experience that would be really beneficial. So whether it's into specific courses, networks, if it's into one-to-ones, conversations with people that that might then be able to unlock further doors for them, and that sort of thing. So really being that kind of personal advocate. Yeah,
that's the approach I'm taking. So that's fantastic. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lorraine. Michelle.
Hi, thanks, David. Morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Brooks. I'm Deputy Director of Finance at North West Ambulance Service. I've been a sponsor for about 3 years and had a number of sponsees. I suppose I found this session useful, and just some reflection and some feedback, please, is that first slide, which was around we're trying to attract people from the underrepresented groups, and actually other people have maybe already gone and sought a sponsor or a mentor, and that first relationship you come across is they lack the confidence because they don't think they're ready for the next step. So my experience with my sponsees has been very much, I have felt every time the first at least 6 to 9 months is very much more of a coaching relationship around the confidence and where they want to be. And then it's really difficult to transition to being the sponsor and pushing them forward, because they're from some of them underrepresented groups. I think they lacked the confidence right at the start. So you don't want to push them into that sponsor type, pushing them forward into networks and events. A lot of the time I've always found at the start is around feeling more like I'm coaching the individuals to build the confidence at first. So it's really hard to get that transition across, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And I agree. I've had a few conversations. I guess the nature of what we're doing here, which is trying to match people up as opposed to there be a natural connection, you know, in the workplace or elsewhere, is that you might not necessarily move straight into the sponsorship relationship, because potentially the individual, as you sort of described, might need something else to start with. And actually, if you start introducing them to people that might not be ready for that conversation as yet, whereas I think for a true sponsorship relationship, it is somebody who is ready to make that move, but might be lacking that network or that extra sort of support or intervention. So I've certainly had that experience. It'd be good, just sort of before I bring you in, Jonathan, unless it's on this topic, have others had similar experiences where they sort of feel themselves moving in between coaching and sponsorship? It'd be really good to hear from others on that topic, and perhaps how you've made that navigated between the two.
It was actually on this topic, if that's okay.
Brilliant, Jonathan. Yeah. Please,
yeah. So I think so. I'm Jonathan Webb from West Yorkshire ICB. I think the point Michelle makes is a good one, and I'm always sort of conscious about. I don't think people know who my sponsee is on the call, so I think I can sort of fairly openly, but I'll probably just sort of ask people to sort of keep this fairly confidential. So, what I've tried to do with the recent sponsee is to frame the arrangement and the relationship as definitely a sponsor or sponsee, but almost dipped into coaching type styles on specific issues when required, which might be, and you might have done the same, Michelle, but it's almost sort of saying, well, there might be some issues that come up where you can see someone's lacking in self-confidence and might say, I'm no good at X. And I will, depending upon how I gauge that conversation, going to sometimes dip into questions about why would you think that, and have you done things that have been successful in the past, and what did that feel like? So I've dipped in and out sometimes, but I do have to be quite conscious about it, because I think they are different roles, and whilst it might be, there's just something about just trying to play what will work for them at the time, as opposed to what you might want to, how you might want to behave on that day. There's something about what's going to help them the best, and sometimes asking that question about what we can do. We can sort of step out of this sponsorship relationship, and we can sort of say, well, I can act as a coach for the next half an hour. Will that be helpful or not? So it's that sort of thing can help. It's not always as clear cut and explicit as that. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I think that sort of really aligns to some of the experiences I've had as well. You've described that really well. Katie, do you want to come in on the topic as well?
Thanks, David. And so I'm Katie Osmond. I'm Chief Finance Officer at Wye Valley Trust in Herefordshire. And I'm fairly new to the sponsor relationship. So I've got a sponsee, and we've had a couple of initial meetings. So it's really helpful actually to hear sort of Jonathan and Michelle's reflections, because it absolutely feels a bit like we've sort of gone into that space, as you say, and dipping a little bit across the two. And I think sometimes it's a reflection of the sort of the day job and the baggage that sponsee is carrying on the day that they actually meet you, isn't it? Because actually, if I reflect on the couple of conversations we've had, we've absolutely started off on a more responsey, that career progression. What are they looking for? Which sort of, types of things could I help to unlock for them or facilitate? But then we sort of get dragged back into the confidence thing around, but I've got this issue and I'm struggling with this, and it's all been a bit tricky this week, and can I just bounce that off? So, and that's fine. I think it's flexible, but it's just really helpful to hear from others around that, almost needing to be flexible, but trying to bring yourself back to the core purpose that you're trying to deliver as a sponsor. So it's really helpful just to hear others are having similar experiences.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I think that's one of the purposes of this, really, is just to make sure we all have a connection with each other and something else to draw on. Could I just check, and apologies if I pronounce this wrong, but Carla, you've asked a question in the chat, which we sort of linked to Lorraine's question earlier. Is that fully answered, or did you want to come in with a bit more on that? Okay, I can't hear anyone coming.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Hello,
go on.
can you hear me now?
Please. Yes, we can. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. I am a potential sponsee. So my experience made me ask that question, because they have been trying to match me with some sponsor, and some of them have not responded, and the ones that responded said she'll better fit. She will prefer a better sponsors, which makes me feel like, is it because I don't have that personal connection or relationship? That's why they're not responding. That's my own experience, and that was what made me ask the question. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks for asking the question and following up with a bit more. It's really helpful. I'm really sorry, first of all, you've had the experience that you're describing. But I've got a couple of thoughts for you. It helps. It might be worth either us or with Natasha touching base to make sure we get you that kind of successful connection. I think the way the program is structured is to necessarily introduce people on this sort of sponsor relationship that perhaps wouldn't normally happen. And so that's a really positive thing, and designed in such a way around supporting those that are underrepresented in the leadership capacity at the moment. So that's kind of purposeful. The sort of slightly trickier element with that is exactly as you're saying, that kind of personal connection, and the requirement really for sponsors to step in and put their own reputation on the line for sponsees. So I think the way that is helpfully overcome, or the way that I've done that, and it'd be great to hear from others, is to actually have a first session when you are connected kind of digitally, if you like, have a first session with your sponsee or sponsor, whichever way around it is, to get to know each other, to understand the objectives of the sponsee, and to understand, as we were talking to Lorraine, and Lorraine was sort of reflecting on, have I got all the right skills, connections, networks, whatever it might be, to actually make that happen for the sponsee, or am I perhaps not the right person? So I always have that sort of first session with people, and hear, listen from the sponsee, understand what they're looking for, reflect back what I might be able to do for them, and then say to them, don't tell me now, go away and have a reflect on it for a couple of weeks. And if you think this might be really helpful for you, then get back in touch and we'll put some regular time in. So I think absolutely sponsors should be looking to do that. But as a sponsor, if you feel, I'm not quite sure if this is the right connection, you absolutely have the right as well to make sure that you're connected with the right person who's going to help you. So there's no good you wasting your time and the sponsor wasting their time if it's not the kind of right connection. And that might be about all sorts of things. It might be about geographics, it might be about career path that people have taken. But if in some instances a sponsor might not be able to help a sponsor in the way that they're looking for. So it's really important, I think, you get that right connection. Does anybody else have an experience along those lines where perhaps as a sponsor you've not felt you're quite the right match, or the other way around if people are sponsors? Jennifer, do you want to come in on that one?
No, it was. I thought you were going to ask for more examples of the difference between sponsoring and mentoring. I was too quick for my hand.
Okay, well, you jump in, and then if anybody else wants to come back.
Okay, yeah. I've had a sponsor for about 9 months now, and when we started our relationship, she was looking for a next step. She quite quickly secured that next step, and so in the lead up to that, it was a sponsoring relationship. Putting her in contact with different people, helping her with that trying to find the right post for her in that next step. But now she's got that job and she's embedding herself in this new role. It is more of a coaching relationship while she gets to grips with the new role. And I imagine it will be for the next probably 6 to 9 months at least before she then starts to want to develop more, look for her next post in perhaps another 6 to 18 months' time. But the sponsorship relationship is meant to be like a 2-year relationship. So I suppose you are over the 2 years, hopefully they would have secured something within that 2 years, and you will naturally move into a cycle of sponsorship, coaching, sponsorship. But I think most sponsors are happy to do that, and it does work well. And there are times as well with my sponsor where we might not meet for 2 months, or she might feel like she is content and doesn't need any support for anything in particular, and it might be 3 months until we meet again. But to have that flexibility is really important.
Yeah, thanks, Chef. It's a really neat way of putting it, I think, and how that kind of relationship might develop. And just for others that might be on the call thinking, well, that's not what I did. I've had experience very similar to that, but I've also had an experience where the sponsorship piece was done, and actually then that was essentially the end of the relationship for now. So that's somebody who's kind of got all my details and things like that, and we talk every now and then, but it hasn't kind of morphed into that coaching relationship. So I think that flexibility, as you sort of talk to, is absolutely key. And for some people that could be continuing, but also don't feel guilty if that sort of your relationship has run its course necessarily. Brilliant. Okay. Any more, or shall I open up with another question to get people thinking? So it's been really helpful to hear from some of those different experiences. So thanks everyone for contributing. And if people don't continue to contribute, this might be fairly short. So please do. The next sort of question I was going to ask people to share if they were happy their experiences on is what you've found to be the real critical success factors. So I guess this is specifically folk on the call who have done some of the sponsorship relationships to date, and what you've found have been really helpful in making that relationship work. Christine, thanks for contributing.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm sure Natasha probably know who I am now. So I've been in the sponsorship program, and thanks David, for quite a long time. So when the sponsorship program first up and running, I'm probably the first few that have gone into it. And I think, like you see, the critical success factor for a good sponsorship program up to now, I still believe that is that from the beginning of the 3 years I have a sponsor, I've always only have 2 sponsors. One will stick to me until she left the organization, and I have a new sponsor. And now that I have a new sponsor, we kind of like you say, do the ground of like touching base and see if the right person. And after a few conversation, after a couple of 3 meetings, then we feel like, okay, we can do this. We can now delve into more deep detailed stuff and of how I feel, because sometimes you have the doubt of being a bit trusting and skeptical at the beginning of the relationship. I don't know you and you don't know me. We know each other, that we work on the NHS, and rightly say, as someone say, they have to advocate for me, and I have to advocate for the sponsor too. It's worked both ways. So for me, I think from my 3 experience, I would say the critical success factor will be trust. That's the main thing. And I think with having trust, then only you be able to believe that you can do this from the sponsee perspective. And I think I sponsor somebody as well, and you as a sponsor, you also said that, you know, I can push this someone, I can help this somebody. I think that's the first base of everything, because if you don't believe, you don't trust, you don't believe, and if you don't believe, so and it's good enough that NHS One Finance have given us all this training and stuff, and so many different things with coaching and mentoring and sponsorship. But if you don't have that as an initial base, I don't think it will be a successful sponsorship relationship. Because you've got to be confident what your sponsor is suggesting to you will be your next step. Because like when I apply for a job, I'm going to have to ask for advice. And if you don't trust them, you won't believe them that, oh, okay, this is the right choice, because the reason why I go to my sponsor is I have a contradiction. So I need a second opinion. So if that second opinion come in, it's very, very useful for me to make a sound judgment, because sometimes they know you better than you know them, because they have been talking to you for such a long time, and so am I. So I think that's what I would say the critical success factor to a good relationship in a sponsorship.
Thanks, Christine. I think that's a really nice perspective on that. And I think sponsorship is often described as quite a high risk relationship, and as you've really rightly put there, that's 2 ways. So the sponsor might be taking a risk in terms of leveraging their reputation, their network, etc. But actually, for the sponsee, it's the trust that the advice you're receiving, the connections you're making, the interventions behind the scenes the sponsor might be making are all the right ones for them. And that high degree of trust is really important. I would just follow up on that before I bring in a couple more hands. So really quickly, where it has worked for you, what are the types of things that have enabled you to trust that sponsor early on in the relationship?
Is that for me? Sorry, David.
Yeah, sorry, Christine, if you don't mind.
Oh, no, that's fine. Obviously, the good thing about the first sponsor I have is I actually work in the same organization. I was introduced to her and say, oh, you'll be very good for this. I said, like, oh, okay, I'm not sure, but gone in, you hear a story about a person and everything. So obey hearsay. So, you know, until you go in and said, we kind of go in, set out a plan, get to know each other, sharing experience. What have she done? What have I done so far? We don't delve down to the deep stuff, like how I felt about work and stuff. So we kind of introduce the background with somebody, and then what we do is then we say, okay, let's look at the sponsorship criteria together. So we're working it together as a team, not like I'm telling you this is what it should be, or you telling me what this should be. We're working it together. We set a plan, we look at it together, right? So this is what it should be. And then what we're saying is we was humble, both of us at the same ground, same level. And then what we do is say, oh, let's set some plan. What's your initial goal? And then we start getting know for the second meeting, setting some plans. And then she say to me, I think you'd be good for this. Like, you know, and she starts advocating me, and she starts giving suggestion to me, what meeting I should attend. And instead of me suggesting to her, is also she suggesting to me what she think will be best for me, suiting on my personality. And even though with my current sponsor, who I don't work together, she gave me very sound advice in terms of her experience, because sometimes I get very clouded in some kind of like, you know, not conflict at work. It's like some decision whether, oh, am I thinking it right or am I overthinking it? So we're all overthinker. So she gave me a sound judgment on maybe you're not, maybe you are, you know, that kind of based on her experience. So then through that, we build in trust and all sort of stuff like that. But I think because we're working as a team rather than you lead me or I lead you, it's become a thing that we work together. It's become a project. It's become a little project for both of us to achieve something. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Really valuable insight. And I guess reflecting back, that feels like it's that first meeting being really kind of foundational, setting the scene, getting to know each other before trying to jump into anything before you've developed that kind of trusting relationship. Thank you. Is it Ghazala?
Yeah, hi. My name's Ghazala. I'm Senior Finance Manager at the Yorkshire ICB. So I just wanted to share that I have been a sponsee on the programme for over 2 years, so I can share my reflections as a sponsee, as well as I've become a sponsor recently. So what I'd say are the critical success factors are, first of all, from a sponsee perspective, I think it's important that the sponsee takes ownership of the relationship and drives the relationship rather than sort of, thinking that the sponsor will do the work, because it's your development and, your career. Yeah. So I think it's important that you take the ownership of that and set the meetings and, sort of be proactive in the relationship. And then from a sponsor's perspective, I think it's important that they're approachable and sort of able to reflect on, their own career and what opportunities and tools they had available to them, to get where they are. So I think it's quite helpful to use some of those experiences and help somebody else in their career. And one of the things that I've sort of used when I've had my meetings with my sponsee is, I think it's important to know what stage of their career they are at that time and where they want to go. So looking at the finance competencies, I think those are really important, because you want to know, it's important to know that have they sort of got all the skills that are needed at their current role, and are they ready to sort of go to the next role? And then what I've asked my sponsee to do is look at the finance competencies for the next banding up and see what the gaps are and what, he needs to do to get to that point. So yeah, those are my reflections.
Brilliant, thank you, Ghazala, and really nice to hear both sides of the coin there. So thank you so much for contributing. Deborah, nice to see you. Come in.
Hi everyone. My name's Deborah. I'm one of the deputy directors of finance at South London and Maudsley. I've had a couple of sponsors now, and actually the thing, the critical success factor is very similar to what Ghazala's just talked about, and that's about the sponsee being proactive, because my experience is it's been really hard, because I've been the one mainly that's had to do all the pushing about meeting and and that's difficult when you're also got a lot of things on your plate as well, because it does slip really easily. So for me, it's one of the things is having a sponsee that actually is proactive and then will chase you for arranging to meet, and just really basic things like that. That's I think for me. The other thing that, and it's not necessarily critical, but I've had one sponsee that was not in my organisation or even sector or even area of work, and another one who's in my organisation. And it's, as a sponsor, it's so much easier when it's somebody that you know that you've so you to be able to advocate for someone, because that what their background is, and that might be something that comes eventually when it's someone you don't know. My first sponsee, I probably didn't have long enough to get to that point, so I never really got to the bottom of what their skills were and things like that. But it's just much easier as a sponsor when it's someone that you actually know and have had experience of working, not necessarily directly with, but even in your organization.
Yeah, definitely does help. And some of the things I've done, John might come on this point as well, is, so for me, I've always had sponsors who are in the same region, and for London that's very easy because it's fairly accessible. I recognise in other spaces it might not be as far as a region, it might have to be kind of smaller geographically than that, but it gives the opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation, which I think really helps with that kind of trust building that others have talked about. And the other thing that I've done with people's permission before is to speak to some of their team members. to sort of understand a little bit of a kind of wider 360 perspective. Jonathan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. I think just following from Deborah, I think that point around having someone that's in your sort of field or your sphere of influence in some way is helpful. I have to say I haven't had that experience as a sponsor. The two sponsees that I've worked with have either been from a different ICB, where I've known a few people but not many, and actually in NHS England where I have worked in the past, so I've got some contacts, but they're very, very old contacts. And in some ways, as a sponsor, you don't really know what that individual is like in their work environment, and you are taking a bit of a punt, to be perfectly honest, to say, well, I can see this person in front of me. From the introductory session, I've got a feel about where they're at in their career. I've got a feel about where they might want to go. I think I can probably develop some rapport with them, which I think comes back to that trust point that was mentioned earlier. But it's not just about trust. I think trust is probably more important than rapport, but actually rapport is really important as well to sustain this. But you are, and it's interesting, Dave, when that slide that you put up at the outset, which talks about you going out on a limb. I am, and I'm doing it on not quite blind trust, but a view that someone's put themselves forward. I think they're probably ready for that move, and I think I can work with them. And I think they're credible, believable, honest, open, good individuals. But there is an element of, well, I'm just going to go with it and see what happens. And so there is a bit of risk in there. Not huge risk, but there is a bit of risk.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And yeah, I think we've all felt that a little bit. Sometimes it's good to share. We're not in the same boat. So my final question, and only got 5 minutes for this really, so I just want to point you to a couple of resources well at the end, is specifically for anybody, and we might not have anyone on the call, but anybody who is lined up to be a sponsor but hasn't necessarily been matched up yet, and it's whether people have got any anxieties or concerns about that. And whilst you've got the kind of floor with a group of folk who do have some experience here that might be able to share some examples. Oh, Lorraine's coming in.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, if you'd have asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I'd have said, yeah, I'm really nervous because I don't know what to expect, and I'm doubting myself. However, because it was a good fit for our relationship, my fears are now allayed. And just to say that it's not as scary as you think if it's the right person, I think, and that their, as you say, values are similar, and also can you meet what they need. So yeah, I just want to say that, because obviously, as I say, 2 weeks ago, it would have been helpful for me to have that conversation. But yeah, it's the fit really, I think.
Thanks Lorraine for sharing. I'm sure there might be somebody who has put their hand up but was thinking something similar. So I'll just give a moment for anybody else who wants to come in on that. Is it Leslie? Is it?
It is, yeah. So I think I've not been matched up with a sponsee yet, but I suppose from some of the conversation here, it appears that potentially people are signing up for being a sponsee, but actually wanting mentoring or coaching. And so I think understanding that going into that relationship and being clear on that is helpful, and understanding what other resources are available really to sort of help differentiate between those. So I think it's been useful today.
Brilliant, thanks. And I think directing somebody elsewhere to something that's going to be more beneficial for them is no bad thing, and not a kind of failure of that connection. Or, as others have described, it might be something you can provide for them, just not necessarily in the sponsorship format. Yeah. Michelle?
You probably just answered that. I was going to say, I had an example only probably 6 weeks ago where I got matched up. I think we've only had 2 sessions, and then we've both agreed this is what she's looking for. But what's really useful is using the One NHS guidance around sponsorship in the first few meetings you have, because straight away her example was she's just been successful internally. She's got a 12-month fixed term acting up as deputy. She didn't want to go anywhere. And the conversation straight off was, but you'll need support over the first 12 months around coaching and what that deputy role feels like and who are the other deputies in the area that you can link in with. But that wasn't a sponsorship arrangement. So again, some of the guidance that's out there really helps as well.
Thanks, Michelle. It's really, really helpful. And it sounds like in that instance, that person would benefit from something, but not necessarily what we've been talking about. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes at the end and perhaps give everyone 5 minutes back to get a cup of tea as well, just to point you towards a couple of things. Now, some of the people on the call are clearly regular users of this series of resources already, so apologies. But those of you not quite so clear, I don't know whether, Natasha, you're still there. If you could share the last 2 slides, so one after another. So this is just something at the bottom of here. I don't know if we can send the link out. It's very easily findable on the One NHS Finance website. You kind of find your way to the sponsorship program. There's a sort of range of resources, as you'd expect, from blogs from sponsor to case studies of different people. That's a YouTube video. The really good one is the sponsorship toolkit, or the really detailed one. So there's loads in there about types of things we've talked about today, but also some really practical kind of templates you can use for your first session, for setting goals together, and all of that sort of thing. So really direct you to spend a few bit of your time in there, having a dig around, see what's there, and what can be used, because that can really help kind of get over any of those anxieties, or if you're getting a bit stuck and all that sort of thing. I'm sure a lot of you will have used some of that already. And then the final slide, which is also on the website, but just a kind of double reminder really, and a bit of a plug, is just some of the events that are coming up. So similar kind of conversations to what we've had today, with a sort of shared audience of other sponsors, as well as the sponsorship summit in September. So all just wonderful opportunities really to connect with other people on the programme and kind of share experiences and kind of keep developing, both as if you're sat here as a sponsor or indeed as a sponsor, and how best to approach. So just wanted to kind of flag those up really and bring the session to an end there. Just before I do, is there anything that anybody's sat on, a really kind of burning question or anything? Can't see any hands, so I'll assume not. What I'll do is I'll just hang on and be the last person to drop off. So if anybody does have a question, but you didn't feel like you could put your hand up, I'll remain here and be really happy to have a quick chat with you. So thanks everyone, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks.